I think I have my full list of games that could be in consideration or good discussion points for Game of the Year 2023. We have a list of all these games. Here's the list we're going to be focusing on. Non-fighting game related titles. Because again, fighting games just I don't feel get fit into my personal GOTY lists. They have their own completely separate listings. Which is weird, I know. I just think fighting games hold a different spot in my heart. Let's talk about Hi-Fi Rush. This was the first one that popped up earlier this year where it's like, oh yeah, this is some GOTY material 150,000%. Like, this shit is cooking. It is so good. And to be honest, like, it was ridiculously polished. A completely different gameplay loop than previous just basic action games. Incorporates music in the most like brilliant ways. I think eventually did win, you know, best sound or something like that at the Game Awards. It won something that it should have won, where it's like, oh yeah, this game incorporates sound and music in like the best ways possible, man. So yeah, it won audio design. Thank God. It would have been an absolute friggin' travesty. Granted, all the other games this year have had really incredible audio design, but this one, you know, quite literally directly incorporated into every aspect of its gameplay. It's hard not to love this, right? It just isn't. And I feel like in many other considerations, Hi-Fi Rush would be up there with considered like, oh yeah, this is just easily one of the best games of the year. And it still is, but it gets bumped down just like a little bit. Again, I'm going to talk about every game from this this respective list that we have right here first. We're going to go over all of them, and I'm going to sort of have a little introspection before we get there. So Hi-Fi Rush, 100%, I loved it. Feels great. It comes from a dev that has not done this stuff historically, but has the tenure, right? You got to realize that the people that made this over at Bethesda or Tango, right? This Tango Gameworks, are a lot of ex-Capcom employees as well. So for that being said, you know, they hammered it, right? For their first like character action game that they've done in quite a long time. It's wonderful, and I think we're going to see more of it. So it's specifically an Xbox game that came out on other things, but who knows? Like, this would be a wonderful game if it made it to other systems, like Nintendo systems, if not PlayStation. That'd be awesome. I mean, I get it. It's a shadow dropped Game Pass game, and that was a big part of it. I don't know if that ended up helping it or not helping it, but I think this game found its audience, which is what makes me happy, because it 100% deserves it. And this is like the perfect example, and we've seen a few games this year that are like this. PlayStation 2 games that came out in 2023, right? This is 100% a PS2 game in 2023, but with like modern sensibilities. This is not a game that should exist. It's not. This game has nowhere to exist anywhere around the current video game like life cycles that aren't indie. This feels like it should be an indie game, and that's about it. But to me, like, these games actually have big budgets. Like, they were relatively like AA, if not AAA made games. And this game, as much as you might think is a small budget game, it is not, dude. This game was very expensive and very polished, and it has a level of craft to it that not many other action games have. So you got to give Hi-Fi Rush a ton of credit, like an absolute ton of credit. This game was a blast. I love playing it. It's just a feel-good time of the year. You want to know what was not the feel-good time of the year? Dead Space. This remake. Let me shift my face up here. This game was awesome. Like, this is the complete opposite of like a feel-good, wonderful time. This was a horrible nightmare adventure through space. I absolutely loved it. To me, this almost renders the original like null and void, you know? Kind of just, I played the original several years ago, maybe in 2015, 2016. But it was good, but I clearly felt like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's cool, but it loses its pace a little bit halfway through, and it comes across as like RE4 in space, which is exactly what it is. It's unapologetically RE4 in space. But this one, in tying with the atmosphere and like some of the quality of life stuff and just how it works, oh my god, this one just overwrites the OG. We have another game we got to talk about, which is RE4 Remake, which is obviously one of the games of the year. However, this one feels like it's so close to the older one, at least in my brain, in my mind, that I'm just like, dude, I went back and looked at the old footage of the old game, and it's just like, wow, man, yeah, this shit looks old as hell. Like, holy sweet Jesus. So anyway, this game was scary as shit. This game had a wonderful sense of progression. This game was just like an absolute banger back in like the mid 2000s when it came out, and it kind of proved that its game design still stands up to this game. I still think it falls off a little bit where the previous Dead Space did, Dead Space 1, and that was at the end. I feel like the end of the game, like the final 10% starts to teeter around a little bit, and it's like, it doesn't, and unfortunately does not end on this like super ridiculous high note, because the last boss fight's like only okay, but really, like, I was genuinely impressed at how much of a faithful remaster this was, considering they did this in like less than 2 years. Now, this game was a journey. If there's one thing I got to give props to Resident Evil 4, somehow realized almost everything. They realized almost everything of classic RE4 in this, and it felt like that was impossible. They actually didn't technically fill in everything. They just added more stuff in different places. And funny enough, we later find out that, oh, the stuff we were missing out on is in fact added to the Ada DLC. I don't think I love this game as much as I do classic Resident Evil 4 Remake. I don't, but goddamn did I love it. I think if we're to talk about all the recent Resident Evil games that have come out, RE2 Remake, or Resident Evil Village, RE3, obviously, like all of those, maybe not RE7 because of the VR aspect of it, but I think I like this game significantly more than even RE2 Remake, even more than Village by a lot. I think this one has the most personality and is the most fun and is everything, dude. We thought that they wouldn't take it this direction, right? We thought that they would not go into the Hokeland that is Resident Evil 4 and the cheesy action schlock that is this series. We thought they'd make it a little bit more like tight and personal, similar to our Resident Evil 2 remake, right? Or even Resident Evil Village to a certain degree. But they didn't. They're like, nah, screw that, dude. We're just gonna throw a billion zombies up your ass. Leon's got one-liners for days. We don't care. And it just feels like a modern approach to Resident Evil 4 with no side eye to like, well, so how do we modernize this story? And like, no, forget it. Just make it take place in the 2000s, like in 2004, 2005 when it does. And let's just keep it there, man. Let's just keep it there. And I'm like, yes, please. I absolutely loved it. I love the characters in this game. I think some characters might be better than the original, but you know, I think the original still stands up. I think the craziest thing about RE4 Classic is that you don't need to remake this game. We said this for forever, dude, that Resident Evil 4 is a game that does not need to get remade. They just like one-to-one'd it, and they're like, screw it, man. We'll just like honor the classic one with as much like, you know, referential praise as that game brings. So this one feels a bit different than Dead Space to me, because Dead Space, at least in my brain, Dead Space feels like I'm really playing the classic Dead Space. It really does. However, RE4 Remake and classic Resident Evil 4 are clearly two different games, bro. Like they clearly feel like they are two different things inspired by the exact same thing. They added so much, right? So many things and routes and stuff are just different placements and yada, yada, yada. They did that also in Dead Space, but they made it feel like it wasn't intrusive. This game wanted to be intrusive, right? Like this moment right here. It wanted to just throw brand new things at you and make you have fun with them. I kind of appreciate about this. Like, it's not the same as like a Final Fantasy VII remake situation. It's not, because they're two very different games, right? This one is so weird because it's added like a new scale of what a remake can be. And, you know, shockingly, that's exactly what classic Resident Evil 2 remake was, and Capcom once again nails it. RE4 is just, this for the majority of this year was probably at top contender for like, this just wins game of the year. There's just no way this shit is taking game of the year from me. Let's just talk about 16, because I think it's worth talking about. A lot of hype behind this game, you know. We were looking forward to it for a long time. I don't want to get into too much because I'm gonna break your guys' back here and not keep you. I'm not gonna keep you on a string. I didn't absolutely love this game. I did not. And I'm in a situation where even with the DLC out, I'm kind of just waiting. I'm kind of just waiting to get like a PC version or something where it functionally just like runs a bit better. There's a lot of parts about Final Fantasy XVI that are absolutely awesome, but weirdly enough, comes a bit closer to a game like Asura's Wrath than I thought it would. Like, I really like Asura's Wrath, like crazy over-the-top action and stuff. And those are the moments I like the most in Final Fantasy XVI, the actual giant scalable fights. But for some reason, like, the weird thing that didn't grab me with this game was like characters and story for the most part. And I have no issue with the game being an action game. I'll say this. I have a lot of things I really liked about this game, and then other parts I really didn't. I didn't like any of the RPG parts of this game, which is funny. I was actually looking forward to it being like an action RPG, but it was just an action game. But it didn't fully commit to being an action game, and it didn't fully commit to being an RPG. I feel like its lack of focus in that way is kind of what made me like lose interest. The beginning part sort of feels like an RPG where it's like establishing characters and you're learning about Sid and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I get it. I really was feeling the story at that point. But because of it, I kind of wish the game was 15 hours shorter and was also just an action game. We could get rid of a lot of we can still keep the story. Clearly, you can have story in action games. Every single one does. But it would have been better if we just like didn't have to deal with like the weapon upgrading stuff and all that meandering and running around. I feel like I spent so much of my time in this game running around, dude. I think some of this stuff in Final Fantasy 16 is literally like peak video game shit. Is like, dang, dude, like how is this so good? To then follow up what you're doing an hour later and you're just like, buddy, how is this so bad? It's such a crazy polar opposite kind of game that I feel like it should be studied. It should be studied of what people liked about it and what people didn't like. It really should. And I don't think that that's a negative comment to the people that like the world or the characters or the RPG stuff. I think you really got to like take like a little bit of an introspective and start to realize, okay, so what worked super good in this game and what was like obviously spread out a little too thin. What was a little too much? Again, I really enjoyed, I think, 50% of Final Fantasy 16 and its story. But then at some point, I was just waiting for the big action set pieces. I'm like, you know what? All I'm doing is just playing through the middle stuff to get me to the action set pieces, and that was really like my big motivation. AC6, like many people, most people, because this is, I think, now the most successful AC game there is. Armored Core 6 is now like the top selling AC game. You know, a ton of people had fun with it. People that aren't mecha porn addicts had a great time with this game this year. And you can fully understand why. Like, I really dig some like mech action stuff. I love Virtual On. You know, I made Virtual On robots in this game. I made you know, Blodia from like Capcom stuff in here. I had a great time with the customization. This game was like, in so many ways, just what FromSoft does. Like, give you a character, have you customize the character to an nth degree, and this game gives you even more customization options than most, and just let you figure out the game your own way. Here's a level, just figure it out, find your weapons, find what works, mess around, have fun. Pretty interesting and intriguing story to a certain degree. A very different style of game than I think we're familiar with traditional FromSoft. You know what's funny? Before this game came out, I remember confidently saying with my chest, I'm like, bro, if there's one thing I'm not going to be worried about when it comes to FromSoft, is going to be like their level design. They're going to bring their absolute immaculate ass FromSoft level design to Armored Core, and that's what we're going to get from Souls games, man. That's going to be it. That's what they're going to carry over from the Souls games. It's going to be that shit. It was not. If there's one thing about this game, like, yeah, the level design has a lot of verticality and shit, but no, there was only like maybe a couple of levels that were actually memorable in any way. The rest of the stuff that came from Souls games was like all the other shit, which was funny because the director said that just as much, that they're like, oh yeah, we learned a lot from all the Souls games, we took all the things from it, big challenging bosses, like all that kind of stuff. Like, the thing that it doesn't have is like Estus flasks and shit in an interconnected world. And I thought they would have done that. I thought they would have potentially gone with like really FromSofty ass level design, but they didn't. Instead, it's just a straight level-based, super customizable mecha action game. If there's one thing this game does super well, incredibly well, ease of use. Armored Core games of the past, the brief ones that I have tried, it's like I'm shoving the controller into my ear to play the game. what am I even doing, dude? It'll take me so long to even wrap my head around the obtuse ass shit I have to do with the buttons on this controller to play this shit. Luckily, AC6 has a little bit of a learning curve, but nothing crazy at all. So if there's one thing they 100% brought from like modern game design, it's pretty easy to control. Things just move, and they just like work in the ways that you expect them to. Working the robot in a variety of modes doesn't feel like that odd, even if they have like a ton of different traversal types. It isn't. Like even Kenny who doesn't play a lot of Souls games, was just playing through this shit and had a big robot and was fucking shit up. That's where the fun is. And luckily, I got the gameplay loop pretty early on. Like pretty early on, I felt like the addictive, like, ooh, I got new thing to blow up that thing. What if this thing goes with this thing? Now they can't dodge out of the way. Ooh, I can get that. Dang, this guy blew me up. What if I use that against this? It's like, oh, I get it. Oh my God, I'm totally being like, I'm being sucked in here. The game got me. I just had a great time like jumping into all of this shit and doing it. Some of the fights that were really hard for others were kind of easy for me, and some ones that are easy for others were hard for me. That is the nature of FromSoft games. Like some FromSoft games, if you just approach it with a build, that build will be dummy thick easy. And then some other person will go in there with some weird weapon, and it's like, oh my God, it's so hard. Like, what the fuck is going on? I love the atmosphere of this game. Like the way the story is presented itself, the way the characters are. There's just something about like the way it's presented is just like, mwah, like it's just so good. And to me, it didn't feel like Nier Automata. It didn't. It felt like dirty and rugged and like lived in. Like there's just something about the way they approach the story of this game that I really loved, right? It's easily one of the best games I played this year, and, you know, the first time I've ever actually completed an Armored Core game. And I think the same is to say for a lot of others. And the nice part about it is that this game was pretty freaking successful. Like, I think the most successful AC game ever. AC6 was wonderful. And it's easily worth a play, even if you're not into crazy, like, mecha stuff. There's a lot to be had here. Talk about a game that took us all by surprise this year. Maybe not. Actually, yeah, it was this year. Because even this year, we got a pretty good idea about Lies of P early on. Because there was, like, a playable beta. So this game kind of came out of nowhere. Is the first, not just Souls-like, because obviously we have Souls-likes, right? Oh, it was a demo. Yeah, it was a demo. It wasn't a beta. We obviously have Souls-likes. It's practically a genre in itself. This was the first one that was a Bloodborne-like. Clearly, directly inspired by Bloodborne in a large variety of ways, but probably was like 50% Bloodborne, you know, 25% Dark Souls, and also 25% Sekiro. Really, if you start like looking at it, it wasn't entirely Bloodborne. It was a little bit of everything. The best credit that you can give Lies of P, in my opinion, here's where this game truly deserves its praise. That it obviously is taking inspiration from FromSoft games. Lies of P does not feel like a Souls-like, and I think that's almost unfair to give it that sort of like name. It just feels like a Souls game. Like it really does, from the level design to the like the authenticity of the characters, to how the game is like giving you new information, to the sort of more palatable story, and the very approachable bosses that have a ton of ways for you to like figure out how to beat them, to having a ridiculous amount of customization options to the character build. The only thing this game is lacking is technically a character creator. But dude, like the amount of variety you get in terms of like moveset and stuff like that is crazy, dude. There's one thing that always gets kind of glossed over when you see FromSoft likes or Souls-like games. The thing that always gets glossed over and really paid attention to is like combat. Game has to be brutally hard. Game has to have crazy challenging bosses. Game has to have, you know, you drop your souls. It's got to have a bonfire, like yada, 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 all that shit. Funny enough, the thing that, in my opinion, makes FromSoft games, much less Souls games, is level design. It's always the levels, man. It's the way like the game presents its world to you and shows you the world piece by piece by piece, and how you get just sort of like mesmerized by like, damn, what's the behind the corner here? I'm gonna go over here. The storytelling that's happening as a result of all of that, like, my God, dude, it's the level design is what makes FromSoft games great. It's the best shit in the industry. To me, of all the other Souls-likes we've played, and I haven't played a ton, But there's clearly one thing that's missing, because it has the crazy challenging, they all have the crazy challenging bosses, they all have, you know, the brutal difficulty, they all have the dropping of souls and the experience and the RPG part, they all have that shit. The only one that had the level design, in my opinion, was this one. It had great story, it had great character variety, great enemy variety, wonderful bosses. I think some people found the bosses in this game to be really difficult, and I understand. The bosses were two-tiered throughout most of it. Some of them were kind of a pain in the butt, but as soon as you figure out like how to actually use your combat, and how to actually use the parry, how to actually use the majority of things you have, because this game gives you a shit ton of tools. Once you start utilizing everything, man, does it click. It clicks so hard, so hard. To the point where I was like, I think I love this. I think I actually love the shit out of this game, dude. To the point where I didn't even start it up again. I wanted to play it again. We had some other things happening, like Mortal Kombat was coming out, but I was just like, I want to save my New Game Plus playthroughs. I really do. I absolutely loved Lies of P, man. I think I like it more than Sekiro. I think I like it equally with like Dark Souls 3. I like it more than Dark Souls 2. I think Elden Ring I obviously like a little bit more. But weirdly enough, it's a Souls-like, not made by FromSoft, but I feel like I enjoyed this playthrough possibly more than the majority of FromSoft games I've played, than several of them. I'm not the most hardcore FromSoft guy. I love these games. They're really fun, but goddamn, dude, this was such a good time, and I loved so much of this world that I can't wait to go back. I really can't wait to go back. Spider-Man 2. This game was genuinely a great time. And I think for many people will be a really high consideration of Game of the Year material. And it's pretty obvious why. Like, it's the most feature-rich Spider-Man game of all of them by a lot. However, I have to get into some of my personal criticisms. And I think the only criticism I have that sort of wore on me was the first 50% of the game. First half of the game, I got an overwhelming feeling of I've been here before and I've done this before. And I couldn't really scratch that feeling for like about half of the game. It was obviously like more refined and better and expanded, and clearly like to rate it on its own, better than Spider-Man Miles Morales and Spider-Man 1. Clearly was better. But that feeling of familiarity really carried for like a while. And it took quite a bit of time to get to the point where there's like some new shit. So you're seeing the new shit right here. Like you're watching symbiote Spider-Man suit stuff. And I swear, like I was playing through the game and feeling a certain way. And I was like, it's good, but it's just like, yeah, I don't really have a feeling to do side quests and stuff because it's all very similar. But then you get symbiote suit. And what is the symbiote suit? Completely new moveset. You're getting a completely different version of Spider-Man with new moves, and you're doing all this wild, crazy stuff that you have not actually seen Spider-Man do before. At least in this series, right? As soon as I got the symbiote suit, I was like, dang, dude, this game is sick. Like, wow. I literally felt the change like in the moment where I wasn't like thinking of like anything else, where I'm kind of being like taken out of the situation where it's like I was noticing I'm feeling pretty similar here with some of the boss fights are obviously cool, but I'm feeling kind of similar. But as soon as I got that suit, man, it was like a light switch turned on. I was like, damn, I'm having fun now. Damn, now I want to go do side quests. I want to go do this. I want to go actively do the different things that I'm doing. I want to get this shit done. And then obviously, you know, when some later events take place, when stuff like this goes down, which isn't really a spoiler at this point, I was like, God damn, dude, this game is a friggin' roller coaster. This game is a goddamn roller coaster. It is wild, man. I'm having a great time here, dude. So by the time you get to like the Venom elements, which are a healthy chunk into the game, to me, it's such a vastly better game. Like, oh my God, dude, it was so incredible. I was just having the best time when this shit was going down, and I was actively looking forward to playing it again. I'm like, I can't wait to see where the story's going. I really, really, really enjoy this shit. So that's my biggest takeaway of Spider-Man, was that for a good chunk of this game, it felt all too familiar, and it felt like I was just playing Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2018 kind of all over again. Although clearly better and more refined than all that stuff. But the moment you take control of some brand new stuff that has not been playable in these games before, that was the part where I was like, oh, I'm feeling the newness and it's having a direct effect on me. Really make me excited for what's going to happen next. And my God, dude, damn, these horror sequences and stuff, this shit was so sick. Oh man. How could I not mention this game? If games of the year are defined by how much time you spent in them or not, to me it's the experience, right? How much does my experience of this game contribute to my feelings of it? Almost everything is the experience with Lethal Company, man. This is arguably one of the greatest co-op games of all time, in my opinion. I think it really is. And to think that it was like such a small thing made by one person. How did I find out about Lethal Company? How do we even get here? How do we even get to the point where it's like a month later, I think it's actually Game of the Year material? It was around October, and some people are like, you should check out this game with Yo Video Games. It's a great Yo Video Games game, and I really didn't pay much attention to it at all. I just told the chat, I was like, chat, like, everyone's talking about this Lethal Company game. It's like blowing up, like it's the new Amogus. It's popping off. It's probably Amogus-like in some way. Yeah, we'll check it out eventually. I was not ready, right? I was actually not ready to experience a game that was this well defined as like an idea. Like, there's just so much in this game that is just brilliant, like shockingly brilliant. Of all the games we've played, sure, it's like, bro, we've played like Aliens, Fireteam, and all that kind of stuff. Those games are awesome. Sure, I love them. This game is probably the closest to the Aliens or / Alien experience ever. You're talking with somebody, they're going through some scary place, you're trying to help them out, like all this shit. It's like the fully realized idea of like isolation in like a weird environment and not knowing if you're the last one alive, and like it teeters around this weird fine line of horror and comedy. If there's one thing that is probably one of the greatest feelings there is being scared and having a good time. Being scared but laughing about it is easily, I think, to most people, one of the most enjoyable experiences in life. It feels so good to be like freaked out about something. It brings you back to like a childlike wonder when you are like in a haunted house or something, but you have friends with you so that you know that you're safe, but you feel like terrified about something. Roller coasters are the same shit. I have not experienced a game that's like that, because to me, single player horror games won't do that. Single player horror games are out to do like one thing, to scare you, right? Because you don't have your friends alongside you to laugh about the situation with after. It's sort of a singular experience where you just sort of experience that shit, and that's the way it is. But if you're there with your friends and like you have that moment of like describing some absolute wild dumb thing that happened with your friends and then laughing about it and then just jumping back in to see the next weird thing that happens, dude, it emulates that childlike wonder feeling of like, oh, we're gonna go to do something we shouldn't be doing now, and we're gonna like, you know, create some memories out of this shit, bro. I love it. It's the perfect combination of anger, of fear, and hilarity in a co-op 4-player game. I truly feel that like the only other game that did this for us with Yo Video Games in a similar fashion was probably Sea of Thieves. And then I realized, oh, this game pretty much is Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves obviously changed a lot and got a lot better over the years, but it reminds me of that experience where it's like, okay, venture out, go look for shit, just go look for loot, and let's bring the loot back and get stuff, right? And this game at least had like a focus where it's like, oh, you have objectives now, bro. Like now you need to hit your profit quotas to continue, or you can like lose it all and stuff. And outside of like the ultimate like other players pirating and doing stuff, yeah, that is definitely different in Sea of Thieves, but it has that sort of feeling of like, go out, get shit, bring it back, buy stuff to get more shit faster, let's just get going. Because it's clearly not a finished game. There's no end. It just keeps like going, right? It's clearly, it doesn't have like levels and shit like that. It's just like, hey, just go out and do some shit, come back and keep going. Just in its existing state as it is right now, it's glorious. Like this game is still in its early release and it's still like early versions or anything like that. It's just an absolute joy. So yeah, Lethal Company. 100% gets a spot as one of my favorite games of this year, without a shadow of a doubt. Here's our top games of the year of 2023, of the crazy year that it is. And unfortunately, I would have to drop, although I did like them, Spider-Man and Final Fantasy XVI. Enough criticisms to the point where I do not think that they hit my top games of the year. Dead Space was absolutely amazing. If I have to pick a top 5, I'm gonna say that Dead Space does not inch this out because it is so close to faithful recreation of the original. I give it like a 0.5 ahead of what the original Dead Space was. So I'm gonna have to put Dead Space down here. I'm pretty confident in saying my top 5 games of 2023, personally. This is me personally. There's no Zelda up here, there's no Baldur's Gate, whatever. AC6, RE4, Remake, Lethal Company, Lies of P, Hi-Fi Rush. Here's a big question. Do I like Hi-Fi Rush or Armored Core 6 more? I think AC6 goes in number 5. I think number 4, Lethal Company. Just for the experience itself and how much I love it, I just have to give massive props to Hi-Fi Rush at the probably the best execution of a PS2-ass PS2 game. And to be real, I feel like AC6 is a PS2-ass PS2 game. This is like a level-based game with customization. Like it feels inherently by its own design very much like a classic-ass PS2 game, just like realized with actual modern sensibilities and budget. But the big point of contention for me, for the majority of this year, Resident Evil 4 Remake nothing was beating it, man. And upon reflection, yeah, I feel like I could have gone in this direction even now with this stuff. And Lies of P could have been number 2. I really do. But the reality of the situation is this, and it still is. I loved Lies of P, man. I loved it. I cannot believe Resident Evil 4 Remake, as good as it is, could possibly have a game in my personal top 5 list take that spot from me. But no shit, I loved Lies of P. I absolutely loved it, man. It was just a joy. The whole game. Every time I jumped back into it, I had such a great time. Every single session, like 2 to 6 hours we played it, I would just sit around the hub world of the game as things are changing around me and shit. I would just sit around it and like play some new music files or music records that I had found throughout the game that is also giving me rewards, and realize like, I think I love this shit, man. Like, I can't, like, every time some crazy boss we beat or some horrible thing we killed and, you know, some nutty-ass level we got through, found some new weapons and brought them back and continued and leveled it up and saw new crazy shit I could do with my arm. Man, this game's fucking great, dude. This shit is great. So, I'm getting nostalgia just thinking about it. I really am. I'm actually getting nostalgia just revisiting the game in my head. So, as much as, like, me going back and thinking of my experiences with all of these, you know, being really good, and these as well, like having great times with all of these games, 2023 was absolutely insane. Probably this is going to go down as one of the craziest years in video game history. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. Lies of P is my game of the year for 2023.